Iran. Now, there are some people, myself included, who weren't really convinced that that war was over in the first place. It turns out it wasn't over in the first place, but it's back on. There are efforts now, apparently, to get a 10-day memorandum of understanding to create more time to negotiate. It's a very, very confusing story. If you're having trouble following the story and it's many bobs and weaves, don't worry. That's normal. It's that confusing a story. Fortunately, like I have Kabir to help me with the data and the analytics on the primary, I have David Rode, who literally, David, there's this little thing in the news business where you ask people a question that you know the answer to, but it's kind of performative, right? I know you're going to have the answer, so I ask it to you as if I don't know the answer, and then you tell. But that's not the case with Iran. Like when I ask you a question about what's going on with Iran, I don't actually know the answer. And I got to say, not to toot my own horn, I know a lot about Iran. I was there when the deal was actually signed. Like I follow this very, very closely, and I have lost control over what is happening in this story. So I put it over to you right now. Where are we right now in this war with Iran, or this not war, or this memorandum of understanding, or the ceasefire, or the Strait of Hormuz?
We are. I think you're being generous, but I'll take it. We are on the verge of a return to all-out war. It's intensifying every day. The Iranians have become more effective at bluntly killing Americans, as we saw with the dignified return of 4 Americans this afternoon. So, and at the same time, it would be a more intense war because you have the Iranians hitting power plants and desalinization plants, in our allies, our Arab Gulf allies, and the president saying he's going to hit a bridge and a power plant for every single time Iran fires in any way.
Let me just stop you there, because this is an important distinction. When people think about war, you think everything's a target, but there are rules of war, and when you go beyond military targets or killing military personnel, this is an internationally recognized thing, you fall into that sort of war crimes territory when you start hitting civilian infrastructure. Now, this came up a lot during the Ukraine war, where Russia would hit power stations, and they would argue that that was being used for military purposes, or it happens in all wars where people hit things that look like they're civilian, and then the argument is, well, they were actually terrorists there, or they were whatever the case. But the point is, Iran is hitting non-military targets using the argument that they are used for military purposes, and America is doing the same. But now we're into this category where we're going to start hitting each other's, in theory, civilian targets.
And what's so dangerous, too, is desalinization plants, if I have that right, in that you have enormous cities in this region, Dubai, Tehran, Riyadh, where millions of people depend on their drinking water from those plants.
Can't drink salt water, so they have to desalinate the water.
Absolutely. And so, that's why this is so dangerous. And then, yes, after World War II, there's an explicit part of the Geneva Conventions that were adopted that says you cannot intentionally punish a civilian population. Like starvation could not be used, as a tactic of war. We can hopefully move past the Middle Ages, bluntly speaking. And then one of them, and just to throw some nuance in here, it has to be, you can hit a power plant if the primary purpose of that power plant is to provide electricity to a military base. You can hit a bridge if it's being used, primarily at that point for a military operation. If Iranian tanks are, I'm talking about, what I'm saying, like a ground war, and the enemy's tanks are using that bridge to attack your side's forces, you can do it there. But Trump, the way he's describing all this, is it's just completely like he's going to randomly hit a bridge.
Well, he's saying
or a power
that's
plant.
The interesting thing. Like sometimes it happens, and then you say it was either an accident or there was some other reason for it. But he's talking about the fact that we're prepared to hit civilian targets. We're not a member of the International Criminal Court and the Rome Statute, so that's part of this whole thing, that we're not subject to some of these agreements, although we'd like to think we are. That said, we see these escalations. We see these 4 U.S. troops who have been killed. Apparently, there have been a number who have been injured as well. And one would like to think when bad things happen, it gives everybody pause. But that's not the language that both sides are using right now. They're using the language of escalation.
Absolutely. So, Mohammed, I believe it's Mohammed, but Ghalibaf, the one of the main negotiators, the Speaker of Iran's parliament, he posted online our doctrine, our defense doctrine. This is roughly what he said: is an eye for an eye. So every time the U.S. hits a civilian target in Iran, they will hit a civilian target, and not in the U.S. obviously, but in these countries, our allies: Kuwait, United Arab Emirates, excuse me, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, and Oman, that they will just pummel them.
I want to just play a little bit. Defense Secretary Hegseth was at Congress talking about the war because he's asking for more money for the war. I want to play for you an exchange between New York Senator Kirsten Gillibrand and Pete Hegseth and get your comment on the other side.
You are asking for unlimited money for bombs when people can't feed their families. And I don't know how this administration intends to defend those decisions to the American people.
Not unlimited bombs, Senator. I'm asking for the right bombs at the right time to ensure we can deter our adversaries into the future. And that's how this is a generational investment. And it was the previous administration that didn't fund this department.
The reason why they are so upset with you and this administration is because the words you have used in the past don't add up.
So just to review, you will not answer whether your statement made on the 14th day of the war that Iran's military had been, quote, destroyed and made combat ineffective was a truthful statement to the American people as you sit here and ask for tens of billions more for the conflict.
Senator's time has
expired. A historic and effective military campaign against the largest state sponsor of terrorism.
Won't answer the question.
So that second part, you and I talked about this last night, David. Part of the confusion that a lot of people have is that they were told last June that we had obliterated Iran's nuclear capability. Turns out that wasn't particularly true, although you can't get a straight answer out of the administration. But more importantly, we keep being told that, boy, we've bombed them to the Stone Ages and the smithereens and they'll never be able to do anything. And essentially we've had regime change and all that. This is where it becomes confusing, because now you have to parse and interpret what they actually mean. We've got you for this because you talk to people and you try and get some sense of what's actually happening. But this is problematic, that the defense secretary is increasingly facing pressure for just not being forthright about what exactly, where are we in this war with Iran exactly?
Yeah, it was interesting. There were two Republican senators, Senator Kennedy and Senator Rounds, who sort of pushed back hard. Kennedy was visibly angry at an answer that Hegseth gave, and Rounds said, we have not finished the job. He acknowledged that the U.S. hasn't won this war, and I thought it was Hegseth's sort of worst performance. He came under pressure from a lot of folks, and Ossoff was particularly effective at saying, a month ago or 2 months ago, Secretary Hegseth, you said that their capacity to wage war had been ended for years, was one quote, and that they had been sort of militarily neutralized, but we just had 4 Americans killed by the Iranians. And then you mentioned the number of wounded, and there's actually more new reporting on this from various news organizations, but that 500 Americans have been wounded now.
Wow. In
the war, 500. And a lot of that are these ballistic missiles, and they're enormous missiles, and they land, and there's tremendous concussions and other injuries that people can suffer. And if I can just take a minute, and I'm doing this probably, we're both, sitting here in New York, but in terms of the dignified return, they named the 4th soldier who gave their lives, and she's a New Yorker. She's from Ozone Park, Queens. Her name is Sergeant Angel Rampersad. It's important, I think, to say people's names.
They're real people.
They're real people. And she's 28 years old, voluntarily enrolled in the military, has won multiple medals, and she's a child of an immigrant. Her father's from Trinidad and Tobago. Her mom's American. And the really sad thing here, again, 28 years old, she was the last one identified. And I think that is a reflection. I don't know for sure, and I'm speculating here. This is what happens when a ballistic missile hits a dorm, an area where American troops are sleeping. And so they had listed her as missing, and they were finally able to identify her based on the remains they could find. And that's the human cost of this war.
Right, because we've talked about the other costs, including the price of gas, which is now above $4 a gallon again. And there are a lot of reasons why Republicans are very frustrated with this war again, and Donald Trump talking about election stealing and all that, because they'd like to be able to go back to their constituents and say, hey, here's a bill that we've passed that can actually help you, like the housing bill that Donald Trump won't sign because he's waiting for the SAVE Act. But all this stuff is hard. Donald Trump actually ran, and to some degree won, on the idea that we shouldn't be involved in all of these wars. And I took that to mean doesn't really like war, and the U.S. can perhaps have a seat at the table as it comes to the Middle East, which is a really complicated thing to do, as you know. But the world was a better place when the U.S. decided that it wanted to be involved in negotiated outcomes in the Middle East. It didn't solve it. It came close a couple times, but didn't solve it. But we've done something quite opposite than what Donald Trump ran on and said he was going to do. We're very actively involved in wars, and we've created a regional war, right? We got Israel fighting all sorts of countries. We've got the Arab allies fighting Iran, and they had a détente for a little while. Those countries were all sort of anti-Iran for a while, and then they kind of made peace with each other to some degree. We have, a tinderbox is the wrong word to use for what the Middle East is right now.
Absolutely. And it's, Iran is more powerful. I mean, they seem emboldened by what has happened.
Right? We've been carrying on for months in a war with them. How are they more powerful now?
No, I'm thinking back to the night of the first attack, February 28th. Our colleague Richard Louis was filling in as anchor, and Trump gave the speech and about how the people, rise up and take over your government. I never in a million years thought that we'd be sitting here 4 months from now with Iran in control of the Strait of Hormuz, something they've never done in their modern history, and we can't seem to stop them. Despite,
it's a choke point, right? And people have written about it. We always knew it was a choke point. They always threatened. You could look at a map and figure out that it was a choke point, but they've never really done it. It's 21 miles, I think, at its narrowest point there. There's also this part that the Houthis can have some control over, the Bab el-Mandab, which is where you're going through if you went through the Suez Canal. 7% of the world's goods go through there. So about 30% of the world's shipped oil goes through here. There's more that goes through there. It's not a big number, but as you see oil and fertilizer prices go up, you realize another major closure, in the Middle East is yet more trouble for the United States. So what you've got when you say Iran is more powerful than they are now, don't know whether they're more powerful in terms of soldiers, don't know what their missile stockpiles look like, don't know what their nuclear stockpile looks like. But what they do have, and they've proved this before, they have the ability to create political turmoil in the United States. They have the ability to negatively affect presidents of the United States. They did it with Jimmy Carter, and they're doing it again.
Yes, the Iranians have proven very adept at humiliating American presidents, and that's why, as this drags on, I think you see President Trump more and more frustrated, and closing that other strait in the Red Sea is sort of a new escalatory tactic by Iran.